You are at Planning for Resiliency, Electric Vehicles and Public Fleets. Again, this is the last session of the Clean Fuel Summit. And before we get started, I wanted to give you a little bit of information about clean cities. If you've been attending all the sessions, you've heard this before, and I apologize, you're going to hear it again. There are at least 80 Clean Cities coalitions across the country, and the Clean Cities organization was started by the Department of Energy after the Clean Air Act. And we all each operate independently. Some of us are hosted in energy offices, councils of government, planning commissions, and even universities. But there are many of us who are independent nonprofits, but we all do the same thing. We all work with fleets to help, and individuals to help implement clean transportation technologies. So how does Clean Cities fit within the DOE? In the DOE, we have the major divisions, one of them being the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Division of DOE. And underneath that is the Vehicle Technology Office. And in the Vehicle Technology Office, we have all of these divisions that, focus on different issues like electrification and advanced systems, materials technology, and a new one, energy efficient mobility systems, that looks at systems as a whole. So we're not just looking at the little parts, we're looking at everything and how they interact and how they connect. And over here at Technology Integration is where Clean Cities is nestled, because we are the implementation arm of, shall we say, of these clean fuel technology projects. And as a Department of Energy Clean Cities program, we're not going to be like your high-paid consultants that have one particular interest or industry in mind. We are here to assist you and guide you, and we'll literally be kind of like your right hand as you implement projects, or you want to integrate biodiesel into your diesel fleet, or if you want to purchase or procure electric or natural gas or propane vehicles into your fleet, or if you are a fueling station and you want to add one of these fuels to your offerings for your fueling customers. We're the ones that are going to be here and help you make sure that your project gets off the ground smoothly and that you have the very best experience, because we're here to look out for you, not any one particular special interest. But the goal is to move our nation towards energy independence, using domestic fuels, clean fuels, protecting our air quality, and reducing carbon emissions. So first, I want to get started today by introducing you to your moderator, Jared Schnader with Calstart. So he is the Director of Bus Programs with the national nonprofit Calstart, which is a technical consulting firm focused on zero-emission vehicle deployments. So Calstart does a lot of the same sort of things that Clean Cities coordinators do and the Clean Cities coalitions, but they are a great partner with these projects. And I'm sure you will enjoy having Jared lead you all today in this very important discussion. Jared?
Yes, thank you so much, Ann, and thank you everybody for joining us today to talk about resiliency and just kind of deploying these new technologies and how that ties into resiliency. So Ann, if you could go on the next slide, please. I'll give you a brief background on who Calstart is, because I know I'm not what everyone came to listen to. So, but just so you guys know who we are and what we do. We're a technical consulting firm, a national nonprofit. We've been around for almost 30 years now, working in light duty, medium and heavy duty buses, innovative mobility and fuels. And we assist different entities with deploying, with planning, procuring, and deploying zero emission technologies. And that goes anything into us getting our hands dirty and getting on the ground and really helping out with deploying vehicles. And then also with the assessment and validation. So after you have vehicles, doing the data collection and analysis for you. Market acceleration, we administer a number of programs across the country, such as HVIP out in California, the New York Truck Voucher Incentive Program up in New York, and a handful of other ones across the country to help accelerate this market. And then public policy is one of the biggest, is one of our big areas as well, working with the federal and state governments to develop policies that can enable these technologies and to secure funding. So if anyone on here is in transit, the Low No program, that was one of our programs that we pitched, as well as actually HVIP out in California. So just real quick on some of the stuff we do there. Next slide, please. We are a member-based company. We have over 280 members. So as you can see from the slide, it's pretty much every OEM in the zero emission space, as well as some of the non-traditional OEMs in that space as well. So we are member-based. We work across all spectrums with our members. Next slide. And our name is Calstart because we were started in California, but we do have offices all across the country. In California, Colorado, the Midwest is in Michigan, also another one in New York. I am actually the little star down here in the bottom right, based in Florida. Next slide, please. So real quick, just to kind of talk about energy demands. And I think this is important for everyone to understand if you haven't really been in this space before. As you're seeing increased EV adoption, it's going to increase the amount of energy demanded on the grid. Level 2 charging can be significant for the light duty and some of the medium duty applications as you start adding in more vehicles. But once you start getting up into the big buses and even long haul trucks, as we're seeing this this kind of unfold, the charging mechanisms and the amount of energy that's being pulled from these, it's massive, really is. And that's why it's so important to worry about resiliency, to plan for resiliency, to start really those plans now and working with all the stakeholders and partners that can help with help ensure that resiliency within your entire your fleet or within your city, wherever you may be in charge of. Next slide, please. So my relevant background, real quick on why resiliency is important to me. So before joining Calstart, I was the CFO of Emerald Coast Medical Transport, which is a non-emergency medical transport company based in Panama City, Florida. And that was on October 10th, 2018, that morning. October 10th, 2018, that afternoon, I became everything from driver, dispatcher, administrator, everything, as Hurricane Michael slammed through our entire area and wiped out everything that we had pretty much. So I became everything and had to operate through that and work with our local transit agencies, work with all of our first responders to make sure that transportation was still being covered from the private sector side. And present day, I help deploy zero emission vehicles all across the country. I run working groups for the Department of Defense, for various transit agencies across the country in different regions, and workforce development. It just kind of goes on. But resiliency is one of the most important things to me because I've seen what can happen firsthand when the entire grid goes down for, in our case, 2 weeks. Next slide. So some considerations to keep in mind when we're talking about resiliency. When power goes out, so do gas pumps. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, you know, what happens if the grid goes down? You know, how are we going to fuel our vehicles? It doesn't matter. Your gas pumps are down too, unless the generators kick back in, but you can use generators to power up most anything else. So I think that part of it, we're just so used to, we as a society are so used to relying on fossil fuels and them always being there, that we forget when everything goes down, those go down as well. So we have to make sure that we're planning for the resiliency all across the spectrum of fuels. Also, especially talking about transit agencies, one thing that I found working across the country with resiliency is transit agencies tend to be the fueling depot for first responders. So when a police department runs out of fuel, they tend to come to the transit agency. We've seen airports coming to transit agencies because they're out of fuel. And because the transit agency has these large reserves, they tend to be kind of the backstop for everyone in a municipality, in a city. The issue is if you're transitioning away from fossil fuels, your reserves are going to be going down. So how does that transition look? Also, generators that support the buildings and the additional energy. Keep in mind that as technologies advance, we can start thinking about the vehicles more as energy storage assets, as opposed to just looking at them as something that consumes energy. It's something that can store and actually deliver energy. So keep that in mind. And also and I think I kind of skipped that middle point, that generators that can support the buildings themselves can also support the vehicles. So again, it all comes down to planning, and that's exactly why we're having these conversations now. Next slide, please. One thing I want to touch on real quick, just to level set everybody, is on distributed energy resources. So DER, you'll also hear these called microgrids, is kind of what most people know them as, but they're usually ancillary to a traditional grid. So you have your traditional power plant, which may be coal or natural gas or nuclear powered, and all of that is feeding power into the grid. These distributed energy resources, think of it as kind of as separating the power generation source from the traditional grid sense, where it will tie back in, but it can be connected directly to the grid, or it can be connected outside the grid as well. So this can assist with resiliency, reliability, offset your peak demands if you're running into those kinds of issues with operating your fleet. Also, it delivers on-site power generation and technically revenue generation if you live in a state that allows you to sell power back to the grid, or something that you can sell to other agencies. Also, we'll talk a little bit about vehicle to grid, but just real basic, the vehicle becomes a storage, like the battery can store the energy and actually deliver it back to the grid. Next slide. So real quick on that vehicle to grid side of this, the vehicle can communicate with the grid to provide or sell energy back to the grid. So you may just think of it as a battery sucking up all the energy from the grid and then selling it back off at peak demand times, or when it's needed by the grid. An example of this, and a really good example that we're starting to see more of this unfold, is in the school bus market, where in the middle of the day when they are not being used because all the students are at school, or in the summer when students typically aren't going to school, or virtual school, however you want to look at this, these vehicles are sitting there. And this is an opportunity at these peak times of the day when power demand is the greatest, that these batteries can be essentially discharged back into the grid. And then once the demand kind of diminishes, they can be charged back up. So think of it this way, your fleet can become its own little small power plant at those times. Next slide. So that's really the overview of what I wanted to give you before we really dive into the true experts in these areas. So we do have, so Anne, I think if you want to go on to the next slide, we've got 3 speakers today, which we're really excited about. We have Eric Newberry from Entergy, Richard Battersby from East Bay Clean Cities, and also David Aasheim from FreeWire. So great people that have speaking on this topic, and we're really excited about it. They're each going to give their own presentations, and after that, we're going to come together on a roundtable discussion, really talking about how they work in this resiliency area, what they see the trends being, where are the opportunities that they see. And I would like to ask everybody, if you have questions along the way, please put them into the chat, put them into the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be monitoring those as well and making sure to include those in the conversation. With that being said, I'd like to bring in Eric Newberry from Entergy to go ahead and start talking about everything that they're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. So hello, everyone. My name is Eric Newberry. I'm a product manager with the innovation group within Entergy called Keystring Labs. Keystring Labs' charge is to develop and deliver new products and services for our customers, oftentimes around emerging technology spaces. Electric vehicles and e-mobility in general is one of the primary areas that we are developing these products within. And specifically, I'm working as developing a potential fleet electrification offering for customers within our territory. That's not only in Louisiana, but we operate within Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, and Arkansas. So really excited for this conversation today. Also, is no surprise, resiliency is a really popular topic at Entergy and is one of the core values of our business. Something that not everyone knows is that everyone at Entergy actually does have a storm role. So whenever a storm comes in, we are responding and shifting over from our day jobs to 100% focus on getting the power and lights back on as quickly as possible. So obviously, you know, I think it's worth stating that I live in Louisiana. I'm assuming most people on the call are located in Louisiana as well, and there is a storm in the Gulf that looks to be coming our way. And so this is something that's front of mind and, you know, timely for the topic of discussion today. Last year, 2020, was a challenging year for a variety of reasons, but especially within Louisiana. We got hit by, I believe it was 7 storms last season, and it affected every single individual within our southern Louisiana territory. That's something that we hope never happens again, but it's something that we're prepared for coming for this year, next year, anytime in the future. With that, obviously, there is the requirement for us to think into the future about what do restorations and what does resiliency look like in a future with higher electric vehicle penetration. And that is kind of going to be the primary topic of what I covered today. With that, next slide. So the key thing at Keystring Labs that we focus on is really making sure that we're listening to our customers and designing products to fulfill their needs. And to do that, we do a lot of customer research. And so we're constantly doing customer research across a variety of topics. But within fleet electrification itself, we've had, kind of 3 key rounds. We've talked with general drivers and users of vehicles in order to understand, broad market frictions and things like that. We started talking with many fleet operators in our territory that haven't electrified about what their thoughts are on electrification, what are some of the challenges. And then we've also talked with fleet operators outside of our territory that have already pursued electrification, so that we got the full kind of scope in terms of customer experience and thoughts towards fleet electrification. What you see here is one of our our products from that research and some of the key customer frictions that they highlighted for us. First and foremost, what we heard across the board is that customers do believe that electric vehicles are the future. They anticipate they are coming and they're starting to plan for it. It's not a matter of if, but when. However, one of the key things that comes up is, how are we going to be able to charge this during a storm? That, especially in our territory, as you see kind of in the bullets that I have on the right-hand side, is first and foremost on people's minds. If you live in Louisiana, you know that it's a threat to our territory and something that we'll have to deal with. And so as we're designing products, that's always going to be front of mind, so that we have resiliency built in to our solutions. And those solutions might not just be charging stations at facilities. It might include backup generation at facilities, but also it's a full, kind of all of the above approach, including charging stations that are available for public use. And making sure that all of our fleets are served in the way that they need to be confident that in a natural disaster, they'll be able to bounce back. The next thing, which this one was interesting and something I learned about through this research, is that sometimes vehicle facilities are purposely located in floodplains. It's cheaper land and you can park vehicles there easier. You can move them when the storms come in. But the challenge when we're talking about electrification at fleet sites is you probably don't want to have your charging infrastructure in a floodplain. And so it's working with customers to understand, these things that might not be visible to the naked eye, but are incorporated into the design of charging infrastructure for fleets. The other main thing is that we heard a lot of times from customers that it's hard for them to believe that they can go 100% electric until there's, more storage options. And right now, gasoline is very storable, although we might have seen some, too storable or alternative storable ways during the Colonial Pipeline outage. Right now, fleets are prepared to know how to store fuel and refuel during outages. Right now, electricity is an on-demand resource, and the grid has to be up and running for you to charge your vehicle in most cases. And it's how do we integrate future battery technology into that, so that we know that customers can have confidence that they can go 100% electric, and that storage isn't necessarily going to be the barrier to that. Overall, I'm going to mention this probably on every slide, but I think the mobile portable charger is the generator of the future. We have started talking to fleets that have already started adopting these. And I think that that's going to be one of the key aspects to resiliency, is using that in a similar way that you use a gas canister today. Next slide. So in order to, best develop products to serve our customers, we think, or I think, the best way to do that is to really put ourselves in our customers' shoes. And in order to do that, we're going to electrify our fleet, and we've already begun electrifying our fleet. You can see on the slide here to the right, one of our Chevy Bolts. We have started to adopt Chevy Bolts for fleet vehicles that are 100% electric. Here it is charging in downtown Baton Rouge at one of the level 2 chargers there. And so we are committed to this. We believe that by being first movers in this space, we are going to face a lot of the challenges that our customers will face, but we'll also be able to be finding and ideating around solutions for those and be ready to provide those for our customers as they begin the electrification journey themselves. One of the key things here is that we are really committed to being leaders in this space. And in doing that, there is a near-term balance of we want to electrify, but we still have to be able to serve during mass outage events, whether it's a storm, a hurricane, an ice storm, whatever it is. And that being said, we think in the long term, we have a lot of confidence that we're going to be able to fully electrify our fleet without a lot of concerns for being able to restore power. Some of the key considerations that we're exploring today that we think will be frictions for our other customers as well are under the considerations grouping here. The first one is something that Jared mentioned, and that's how do we include backup generation into charging infrastructure? So for restorations, all of our facilities do have a backup generator that kicks on so that we can run and operate out of it. And one of the key questions today is, do we tie electric vehicle charging into that backup generation? Do we have a separate backup generation just for the electric vehicles and their chargers? Maybe that gives us a little bit more flexibility as we want to grow the electrification of our fleet. There's a lot of kind of interesting discussions and options that are there. And one of the things that I'll probably say that is true of almost anything in here is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. And that by learning what all those different shapes and sizes of solutions are, we're going to be able to better provide that for our customers in the future. The next thing that we're really looking into is, is how do we pick the vehicles to electrify? So right now, that's one of the key things for us is to understand we have a fleet of any type of vehicle that you can imagine, from what you see on the screen here to airboats. And it's selecting what vehicles of those fleets are the right ones to electrify over what period of time. Maybe our bucket trucks aren't the best option to electrify yet until we are, fully set up with solutions to charge those during an outage event. Now, I will say there's not a electric bucket truck, at least to the mass market, that's available quite yet. So we can't compare the metrics on that, but we are electrifying the bucket aspect of the truck, where we're installing batteries there. So instead of them running off of an idling engine, they can run off of an electrically charged battery. And we've deployed those in storm events already to, no issue. The last thing here is really, what is the viability of mobile charging? We have actually already started talking with our fuel vendors about mobile charging and what they're looking at there. And we're feeling really good about what the options are. As Jared mentioned, when the power goes out, so does the fuel, the gas stations. And so we already have a lot of experience of bringing in fuel tankers to refuel our vehicles during those outage times. I expect to look and see similar things in the future, just with big batteries or a variety of different size batteries. And then, as I said, we're going through these growing pains of electrifying and picking up those learnings along the way so that we can best benefit our customers in the future as they look to start this journey as well. So next slide, please. So I'll leave you with kind of the 4 key things that we're thinking about at Entergy as far as it goes for resiliency and electric vehicles. The first is, I personally think probably the most important, which is electrifying our hurricane evacuation routes. Obviously, this is a key priority for us because everyone in our territory, whether it's a fleet or an individual, needs to be able to be confident they can evacuate safely and evacuate with their vehicles. And so with that, we are looking at our evacuation routes and understanding how do we electrify them, not only for today, but for the future when it's not just, residential customers, but full fleets, gateway customers coming from the ports, a whole variety of anticipating that there's the potential for any vehicle to electrify and ensuring that they have a safe route out. The second, and I kind of cheated on this one, it's kind of two, is pre-storm communications and post-storm restoration prioritization. We have to be, to the point of overly communicative with our customers if a storm is coming and there's outages that are potentially coming. We need to make sure that customers know that they should charge their vehicles ahead of time and be prepared to evacuate if they need to. They also may need to know ahead of time, hey, charge up those batteries that you're seeing replacing, fuel canisters in the future. The second piece of this is really the post-storm restoration and prioritization. So I like to look at Hurricane Laura, which, it was a really trying time for all of us, as a great example of this, where we worked, hand in hand with Tesla to get the supercharger station back energized. And my cohort, or my counterpart, Scott Barrios, who's maybe seen on other webinars, he actually saw a woman charging her Tesla at one of those superchargers after the restoration. And when it struck up a conversation, she was so thankful that was prioritized because she had not been able to charge her vehicle since returning to Lake Charles, since the power in her home was still out. And so that's really working with fleets to understand where public fast charging will be available, but also how do we make sure that those charging infrastructures are prioritized in the same way that gas stations are today. The next is consultation on electrifying the right vehicles, as I like to say. As I mentioned, we're doing this ourselves. We want to be, we intend to, and we can provide the services to any fleet that's interested today, thinking through what are those right vehicles to electrify. Not only looking at it from an economic and a sustainability perspective, but really looking at it as from a resiliency perspective as well, and ensuring that goes into the equation when making recommendations of what vehicles to electrify when. And then the last thing, as I continue to hit on, is future mobile charging capabilities. So today, I have a generator on there because that is realistically a way that people will be charging electric vehicles in resiliency in the near term. You may have seen some pictures of during the wildfires in California last year with people charging their Teslas on diesel backup generators. We hope that we have alternative solutions to that in the future. And we think that there are a lot being developed today from battery solutions that is something to really be excited about. And it's not just, small mobile chargers, but the scale can really be as big as you can imagine. From, replacing a semi, the back of a semi with a giant battery and using that to deploy not only to, charge our vehicles, but is that something that we can use to deploy to help our customers? Is it something that we can help to deploy to help charging stations pop back on? And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity there that we're going to be exploring a lot internally, and then figuring out how the best way to spin that around and deploy that to benefit our customers really at a time of their greatest need. That covers pretty much what I had today. I'll kick it back to you, Jared.
Thanks, Eric. And real quick, Eric, while I have you on there, so I want to know about the airboat. When is that going to be electrified?
Hey, I don't know if I have an answer for that one.
We actually come back and tell us.
I will. You'd be surprised at the work being done in the electric boat space. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, there's some great companies out there that do have electric boats. In fact, the boats on the San Antonio River for all tourists, they're all electric.
Yep. No, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Eric. And we'll bring you back in a little bit. But right now I want to kick it over to Richard Battersby with East Bay Clean Cities. Richard, thanks for joining us, and go ahead.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. I'm Richard Battersby. I'm with the East Bay Clean Cities Coalition, and we are located in Northern California. We do pretty much similar activities as Louisiana Clean Fuels. We're part of that 80+ coalition network nationwide that fall under the Federal Department of Energy. We're actually the ones that do stuff rather than talking and research. We execute deployments, and I like to characterize us as the catalysts that bring the players together between the potential fleet customers, the vehicle manufacturers, the fuel providers, and all of the related equipment suppliers, and then also interested parties. So with that, can we go to the next slide, please? As I mentioned, we're in Northern California, and you might be asking yourself, why do we have somebody from Northern California here talking about this? Obviously, what we do in California is going to be very different than in Louisiana or any other state, but hopefully you can learn from our experiences. And by that, I mean from our mistakes and successes. We're kind of on the leading edge of alternative fuel vehicle deployments in many ways. And it's kind of unusual to see how fuels get deployed and progressed. The one consistent factor is there is no one fuel that fits all circumstances. So my advice to you is explore all the options, and when it comes to deploying an alternative fuel, just make the choice that makes sense for you. There's a couple of statistics up there for you. One of the primary ones I just wanted to highlight, we're a 501c3 all volunteer organization. Myself, all the members of the board, we all have full-time jobs elsewhere. Many of us are actual fleet managers. That picture there is me. I actually work for the city of Oakland. And you can see from the protective mask that was taken during COVID-19, the news crew came out, did a little piece on us. We were using our solar powered electric vehicle charging station to provide power to one of our COVID-19 test centers. So I might talk about that a little bit. I definitely want to talk about the technology. But the takeaways that you should get seeing me here and now, number one, that photo that Ann's using obviously isn't me currently. That's probably about 15 years ago. And yeah, it's a younger version. And number two, from the photo there on the screen, I've been told I have a face for radio, and that's why I'm wearing that mask. So anyway, just a little bit of humor there. Traditionally with alternative fuels, the powerhouse in our region has been natural gas, and natural gas still plays a significant role. But lately the predominant fuel is renewable diesel, so I'll mention that a little bit, but I really want to focus on battery electric and zero emission technology. Next slide, please. Here's our alt fuel trends over the last 5 years, and like I said, it's going to vary from region to region. But for us in particular, California's unique. Oregon also has access to renewable diesel. So the reason I wanted to show this slide is you can see that traditionally our petroleum fuel displacement averages about 10 million gallons. 2015 wasn't any different in that respect. But 2015 is the year that renewable diesel came on the market for fleets in California. Now, renewable diesel had been around for 10 years. It's been blended into the petroleum fuel supply and throughout the entire state of California, the petroleum diesel fuel supply. So it's not a new fuel, but it hadn't been marketed bulk. So 2015, that fuel came available to fleets. And then you go down to the next pie chart or the pie graph there at the bottom. That's our 2020 fuel displacement. You can see our fuel displacement more than doubled, and the lion's share is due to renewable diesel. So while we're primarily going to focus on zero emission battery electric technology, clearly renewable diesels in the future for you, regardless of where you're at now. Right now it's cost comparable to petroleum diesel in California and Oregon, but that's due to very creative incentive programs, the low carbon fuel standard in California, and Oregon has I think a clean fuel standard that helps offset the cost of production. But production is increasing wildly over the last 2 years. We're expecting to see about 2 billion, that's B with a B, gallon of production capacity just within the domestic United States. And of particular importance, currently, Louisiana is the primary source of renewable diesel for the United States. There's about 400,000 gallon production capacity currently, but that's ramping up, I think, to 800,000 or 900,000. The message here is everyone that's refining renewable diesel is expanding or increasing capacity, and there's new renewable diesel refineries coming online. Like realistically, almost every month you read about a new one. Valero, BP, Phillips 66, they've all jumped into the game. So the petroleum refiners have seen the writing on the wall. It's not biodiesel, it's renewable diesel. It's produced from similar feedstock, but much more attractive. So you can see, I've never seen that in 5 years. I got you, Ann, I got to move on. I've never seen a fuel that doubled capacity over the course of 5 years. So anyway, the emerging trends for us, fuel diversity, resiliency, obviously that's a big one. We all watch the news. We all know if you have all of your eggs in one basket, that's usually not such a good thing. We learned that in the East Coast hurricanes, when petroleum fuel availability was limited, natural gas vehicles were still operating. Here in California, our electric grid's not exactly where it needs to be, so we have shutdowns on occasion. Sometimes it's from high winds, other times it's from rolling brownouts. So if you're relying on battery electric, as Eric mentioned, it's very important to have a backup plan, backup generators, so you can keep putting electricity, which is fuel, into those vehicles. And of course, the issue in Texas also just sort of highlighted the importance of fuel diversity, which it improves your resiliency. Another big trend, I already talked about renewable diesel on the first slide, but there's also, if you are not aware, renewable natural gas, renewable propane, renewable gasoline's a new one just entering the scene. SAF is sustainable aviation fuel, and there is renewable hydrogen. So all of the alternative fuels that you see at the bottom table illustrated, those are all being sourced renewably at some point. And if they're not widely available now, it's only because economies of scale. As the production ramps up, we're going to see the costs come down. Clearly in California, battery electric and hydrogen are the hot fuels. Renewable diesel is not very sexy, but everybody's talking about battery electric and hydrogen. And as we move into those fuels, solar and V2G, vehicle to grid, or as we heard earlier, these are also topics of great importance. I like that little photo on the right. Because I work for Public Works, we're able to make this little display, and it's just showing to us, we're at the intersection of the Electric Avenue and Hydrogen Highway in California, and you can expect to be in the same situation yourself in the near future. Next slide, please. For the city of Oakland, here's where, if you're a fleet manager, yeah, the Clean Cities message is important, but I could share what we're doing as a fleet. We're completely transitioning our fleet to either low carbon or renewable fuel sources. We like to say we've had the greenest fleet in the area for the last 25 years, but that's only because we used to paint our cars that crappy pastel green in the photo. Now we're actually green because of the emissions that we're no longer putting out of the tailpipe. So I mentioned battery electric. We've got a large fleet of battery electric Nissan Leafs. We also have a large deployment of plug-in hybrid electric vehicles across manufacturers. We got a handful of hydrogen Toyota fuel cell Mirais, which we're running. And we also have been using CNG for the last 25 years. Renewable diesel has actually been such a huge impact on our operation. We were buying the Chevy Cruze diesel sedans just to run them on renewable diesel, but since Chevrolet's not making those anymore, we've defaulted back to plug-in hybrids. So I guess the message here is, although some of these technologies have lower emissions and we have varying operating costs, we've diversified the fuels that we're running in these vehicles. And again, this sort of drives home the point that a successful alternative fuel program usually depends on the choices and availability. Next slide, please. So drilling down on battery electric, we've got mandates in California. I'll just go into a little bit of detail, but what you've heard about in the news, it's true. The governor's issued proclamation 2035, all battery electric. Really an aspirational goal, but behind those headlines, there's actually some very real regulations that are coming out and have been issued. We're under mandate from the Air Resources Board It's called the Innovative Clean Transit Rule. Transit buses, 25% of all new transit buses have to be zero emission, which is either battery electric beginning in 2023, that gradually phases into 100% by 2029. So we're going to see huge deployments of zero emission buses, transit buses in the near future. We've also got medium heavy duty rules that are coming into play. The Advanced Clean Fleet Rule, it's going to mandate 50% of all class 4 or heavier vehicles purchased. 50% of those have to be zero emission. That's for municipal fleets. For commercial fleets, 100% of their class 4 to 8 vehicles by 2035 have to be battery electric. So these are very aggressive goals, and associated with those goals, now we're forced to look at other concerns. The grid capacity is a big concern, not just the grid in general, but do we have enough power to our depot where we park the vehicles at night? Because with large deployments of battery electric, obviously you need the power and the charging infrastructure. You also need to take a look at your facility. There's special Department of Industrial regulations and OSHA regulations pertaining to battery electric vehicles, such as metallic composition of the concrete slab, distances from the vehicle, the electrified vehicle, to the roof and other vehicles next to it that require major modifications. There can be power availability concerns if you don't have a large enough trunk line to your location. With those dates that I shared with you, we're looking at that now. We're engaging with the utilities. These are not things we planned on doing, both strategically or financially. And so that's kind of like the doom and gloom. Along the positive notes, we're seeing law enforcement applications available now. We're deploying the hybrid electric Ford utility police vehicle, but City of Fremont down the street from us and many other law enforcement agencies are actually using fully battery electric Tesla vehicles for both administrative and pursuit applications. We're using battery electric Nissan Leafs for parking enforcement. So those examples are out there. And if you think it's challenging, state of California has the Tesla Model 3s on contract for $36,000. So that's actually less than we're paying for our hybrid utility. And it's comparable with other offerings in the class. And one of the other unique aspects that we've been encountering lately, talking about resiliency, is the solar EV charging. There's in the picture below, you see one of our units. We've got 4 or 5 of these throughout the city. It just gives you an extra layer of comfort should there be a power interruption. These solar powered electric vehicle charging stations work just like the ones plugged into the grid, except they convert sunshine into fuel. So like we say, we go around town driving on sunshine. This is just sort of like a brief update of where we're at in the city of Oakland. And with that, you could take it to the next slide. And there are some following slides on funding. For those of you that are interested, these are some of the options available in California, but I just included them as an extra, and you should just advance them to get down to Dave. Which, by the way, that little photo there is one of the FreeWire Mobi units. That's a mobile electric vehicle level 2 electric vehicle charging station. That's real handy if you have parking structures where folks need to charge, but I'll let Dave tell you about that.
Thanks so much, Richard. I really appreciate it, and very good job. And that's a perfect segue into freeing Dave Aasheim with FreeWire. So Dave, why don't you go ahead and kick it off there.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Hey, everyone. Dave Aasheim with FreeWire. And today I'm going to provide a high-level overview of FreeWire's current products and then a glimpse into some upcoming products that'll provide some resiliency for hosts and drivers and fleets that need to charge in normal conditions or adverse conditions. Next slide, please. Yeah, so thanks, Richard, for that segue. The Mobi Gen and the Mobi EV that you see on the left are how FreeWire got their start in 2014. These are mobile battery chargers that can charge anything that plugs in. So the Mobi Gen can charge anything that plugs in, and the Mobi EV is really designed for electric vehicle charging. In 2020, we introduced the Boost on the right, and I'll talk about that in detail, but all have battery storage components integrated into the machines. Next slide. Perfect. So just an example, many high profile customers that we've had throughout the years in various verticals, incorporating the Moby Gen and the Moby EV for added resiliencies. So again, these can charge up electric vehicles at fleets, in dealerships. The Moby Gen can provide battery backup for lights, food trucks, audiovisual for events, and emergency equipment. Next slide. So here's a nice breakaway of our Boost DC fast charger. The heart and soul of the Boost is the proprietary battery pack that you see there on the bottom. We also have a power converter, but that is the heart and soul of our charger. It's UL listed and it's Buy America compliant, which is nice for a lot of incentives throughout the United States. It's got a robust battery pack that we source from the same company that provides batteries for the Nissan Leaf and the Nissan Ariya that are coming out. So we're super proud of the resiliency there. So FreeWire, we're a 7-year-old, oh, one more backup, not done. 7-year-old company. We're based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we've got several patents and a lot of high profile customers that have led to some nice investors. The likes of British Petroleum is one of our major investors. We are doing a major project with them, some projects here in the United States, but a major project in the United Kingdom. Over 700 of these Boost chargers are being deployed in various parts of the United Kingdom. ABB is a manufacturer of electric vehicle charging stations and DC fast chargers. Nice that they took a liking to our innovation, and they are a major investor in FreeWire as well. And then we've got some OEMs, the likes of Volvo and others that will be named, as well as some investors that are super interested in our innovations. So, next slide. Next slide, I'd like to talk about where does Boost fit in, and how is Boost different than traditional fast chargers? This is what that brought me over to FreeWire. Number one, it's a lower cost of installation than traditional fast chargers. We only require a 208 or 240 volt power input, which is usually readily available on most of the locations that are interested in adding DC fast chargers. Second, 2 electric vehicles can charge simultaneously at the same time. Usually with traditional fast chargers, you can only charge 1 EV per dispenser. So that equates into a smaller footprint that you see there, and that's very attractive to many customers. Faster deployment time also comes into play, easier permitting and infrastructure requirements. So yeah, installing this can save you some time on deployment as well. And then lower operating costs because of the battery storage. We can mitigate demand charges and peak loads, and that has a substantial savings on demand charges and monthly utility bills, still providing a high power output for the drivers. And then last, because of the low cost of installation, it's a lower pain point. If you ever needed to move the station for whatever reason, moving or relocating is much easier and less painful than traditional fast chargers. Next slide. So, the headline here, this is a nice marketing slide, but the headline here is that FreeWire is at the center of 3 powerful trends. Number one, the charging infrastructure, energy services in our battery storage. We're able to do some special things, and then grid modernization. We're able to allow the current grid to do much more with our DC fast charger and with our integration. So we provide these bundled products that aren't readily available in many markets, and we allow DC fast charging in locations that possibly couldn't consider them in the past. Real quick, just an overview of some future resilient capabilities with FreeWire, and these announcements will be official at later dates, but we will have a product that is perfect for hurricane evacuation. It will work what we call grid down. If there's no electricity, the battery will actually be able to charge vehicles without being connected to the grid. We will also have bidirectional capability that will allow the battery to power other other items. Maybe your store or your facility will be able to keep the lights on, and in a lot of instances, we'll be able to keep the ice cream cold. And then we'll have microgrid capabilities, real quick. That's all right. Microgrid capabilities. We'll be able to incorporate other devices such as solar and vehicles, and those will be announced later. But it's really an exciting company and an exciting product to be talking about. So where does Boost fit in? These are the customers that have really taken a shining to the Boost charger. Fleets number one. Again, it's very easy to install the Boost DC fast charger. And then, believe it or not, convenience stores and fueling centers. Again, along major evacuation routes. These can be some strategic locations, especially for hurricane evacuation, but also every normal everyday use. C-stores and convenience and fueling centers power their locations with 208. So very easy to incorporate a Boost charger in these locations. And then obviously sites where 480 volt is not readily available or prohibitive or maybe expensive to pull in from the utility side. Very attractive to install a Boost in those situations. Places where demand charges, a lot of states, a lot of utilities have demand charges that are prohibitive for DC fast charge business models. The Boost with the battery storage mitigates those and really has a nice effect on the demand charges that you would see on traditional fast chargers. Pilot sites. If you're dipping your toe in the water, or you just want to, put a fast charger in a temporary location, that's where we're getting a lot of customers inquiring about the Boost. And then locations that have a small footprint or small space constraints. Again, the compactness of the Boost is very attractive for a lot of sites. So just I think this is a nice representation of how the Boost charger not only provides more power, more grid power. We only require the same infrastructure that really a dual level port level 2 station would require. 80 to 100 amps is all that's necessary to power the battery that's incorporated in the Boost. But the driver experience, the charger experience is going to be on par with ultra high speed chargers like Tesla. So up to 150 kW is available. The graphs on the right really accentuate the value proposition of the Boost, showing the lower installation costs of the Boost, the lower ongoing costs, and then the faster deployment time of the Boost. Next slide shows a nice representation, again, a nice snapshot of the added resiliency. Again, if you need to relocate the Boost charger, less painful than the sunken costs that are incurred in traditional fast chargers. Next slide is going to also show you a nice footprint, the footprint that's necessary for traditional fast chargers. You see highlighted in yellow. Usually a transformer, some switch gear, and electrical panels you see off to the right are a necessary footprint for traditional fast chargers. Everything's bundled up nicely, and we can do the same thing that these chargers can do with the addition that we have battery storage in our unit, so that offers some additional superpowers. And I think they caught wind of that, and the next slide is going to show you something interesting. It's the same site, but they added battery storage to this facility, and you can just it's probably the best drone captured picture that we have, but it shows everything in red from the two dispensers to the power cabinets, the switchgear, and the new battery and inverters on the right. This is doing everything that the green Boost charger is doing on the left. 25 times smaller footprint for the Boost charger, and well below half the project cost that was necessary to put all of this in, and it's all the same company that does it with Boost, so you can see the attractiveness. A real quick explanation, if you're not familiar with demand charges, a side-by-side comparison. The vehicles are able to power at a higher rate than early electric vehicles, and the chargers are able to charge them at a faster rate. And so, you know, what's coming into play now are demand charges from the utilities. And I've got a representation. Let's focus on one of these vehicles that's able to pull 100 kW on a traditional fast charger. And because it was pulling the peak load at 100 kW, the demand charge that results of that, if your demand charge at your utility is, let's say, $9 per kW, that's a $900 event that just took place in that single charging session. And that, you know, when you get your monthly utility bill, is shocking and can be prohibitive for your fueling costs. Compared to the boost charger that again only takes a low input, 27 kW max, we will still provide the high output up to 150 kW, but your input, your draw from the utility will be a maximum of 27 kW. So again, very attractive for the ongoing costs. Next slide, I'd like to show, you know, the question that gets asked. We've got a 160 kilowatt hour battery. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but it's a 160 kilowatt hour battery. We can also, for fleets, we've got two connectors, as I also mentioned. We can configure them for the vehicles that are currently out there. One can be a CHAdeMO connector and one can be a CCS connector. Or if you know that you have a standard fleet, we can configure the connectors to the protocol that fits your fleet. So very, very flexible, and still two cars can charge at the same time on this charger. So here's a model of a high utilization fleet analysis. And you know, Boost was designed to support 15 to 25 sessions a day, but you know, sometimes the fleets come in all during the same time. And this is showing a modeling where, you know, we've got intermittent charging throughout the morning and afternoon, and the electric vehicles are coming back midday to top off so that they could finish their daily routes. So we're able to show charging without any compromise, 19 vehicles here. So the blue line that you see there is the state of charge of the battery, and the grids, the pegs that you see with the van indicates the cars and the times that they charged. If for any reason that the battery is depleted, and it rarely happens, it can go into bypass mode, and that green line indicates what we're drawing from the grid. And if it ever goes below 10% state of charge, the charger will go into bypass mode and charge vehicles at 20 kW and not leave them stranded. But you know, when we're talking to fleets, we like to understand the routes and the day-to-day mileage requirements. And this is showing an example of one Boost charger. And in several of our fleet applications, we're doing multiple chargers. And in some, in a recent one, we just put 4 of these Boost chargers so that there was no risk of flatlining, if you will. Next slide shows the power acceptance rates of a lot of the popular cars and the upcoming cars that we're all excited to see, especially on the fleet side with the trucks. They're all leveling out at about 150 kW max, but a lot of the popular cars are within that 100 kW power draw. And then you've got some fancy cars like the Porsche Taycan that can pull a higher rate, but the Boost charger can charge every one of these vehicles, including the Porsche Taycan. And with that, I'm going to transition real quickly. You know, with the Boost charger, we've got an easy pathway to upgrade existing level 2s or older DC fast chargers that might have been deployed. Next slide, please. And so you've got lots of old level 2s that may not have manufacturer support, and there's a time when you need to decide, do we replace it with another level 2, or maybe we need to upgrade to a faster charging solution. And with level 2s and the requirements for the Boost charger, it's very easy to use the existing infrastructure to replace level 2 stations with a high-speed Boost charger, and we're able to charge at 20 times higher rate of speed, equating to more EVs being charged with the existing infrastructure. One last slide here before I wrap up, but lots of opportunity, lots of level 2s. I've been in the industry since 2010, 60,000 public chargers out there and probably growing. So a lot of them are older and antiquated and need to be upgraded. And it's an opportunity. One of our first projects was with Public Service of Oklahoma, where we upgraded an older style Telephonics Level 2 to a boost charger, and it gets great utilization, great usage in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. So we've got guidance on, if you're interested to do this, we've got guidance that can walk you through, and installation guides that can do that, or contact us. We're happy to give you give you what you need to make it an easy project. And last, I'm happy to provide more details if FreeWire products look like they're attractive to your projects. Please contact me anytime for more details. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks so much, Dave. And also, Eric and Richard, if you can turn your cameras back on and come back in, we'd really like to kind of have a discussion around this. So thank you so much for the presentations, just all the work you guys do. It's fantastic. And really just kind of starting off and looking at kind of going back to some of the presentations. Richard, I want to bring you in here real quick on this. You're talking about displacing traditional fuels. And we know just off of basic economics that when there's lower demand, there's going to be kind of this, there isn't the demand. So really, we would say the price is going to drop, but really it still costs a lot of money to extract crude. So we expect to see prices rise on this. And you also have all these regulations tying in with California. But with those regulations come some really great, I guess, structure from the government. I know regulations are not what everyone wants to see, but at the same time, if you're moving in that direction, you're seeing prices theoretically will be going up on oil. What is kind of like, what's California's take? How are they moving towards allowing all of their citizens to start owning and operating electric vehicles?
That's a great question, Jared. There's multiple funding opportunities. Typically, they break out in 3 levels: federal, state, and local. For those of you on the webinar here that aren't in California, I suggest you contact your local Clean Cities Coalition. They'll be the single best resource to give you the information on, such as California, we have incentives on the front end, like the hybrid vehicle incentive program that Calstart manages for heavy duty vehicles. That's a voucher, that's a point of sale reduction in cost. That's absolutely the best model. The California, and that's typically targeted towards fleets. California actually has a statewide program that offers a rebate back, the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project. That's for fleets or for consumers. That it can be quite attractive. There's also the federal tax credit that you can get. That's up to, I think, $7,500 for a battery electric vehicle. And then there's other alternative funding sources depending on the type of fuel that you're deploying. California, as we mentioned, has that low carbon fuel standard. It's kind of unique. There's funding available via that program through the Air Resources Board, and each one of the 50 states has funding available through the VW Mitigation Trust Fund. So again, yes, the cost can be a little bit higher, but in some cases like the Tesla police vehicle, it's actually lower than the comparable vehicle we were deploying. And then take a look at the total cost of ownership. One of the main reasons battery electric vehicles pencil out over the life of the vehicle is the fuel costs are something like 60% less than a gasoline or diesel powered vehicle, and the operating and maintenance costs are about 40% less. So the longer you operate that vehicle, the less it costs you. Looking at the total life cycle, you probably come out ahead. But again, you don't have to worry about jumping in the deep end of the pool on your own. You got your local Clean Cities Coalition. Give them a call. They'll be glad to help you.
Yeah, and if I could jump in real quick, in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge specifically, we have among the cheapest electricity in the nation. So it's even cheaper here to fuel up on an electric vehicle. And heads up, our alternative fuel infrastructure tax credit for all fueling type stations, natural gas, propane, and electric vehicles ends at the end of this year. So we will no longer have a state tax credit for infrastructure projects in Louisiana, and it's very likely that our vehicle tax credit will end in 2 weeks if the governor signs a bill, SB 8, that just passed in the state legislature. So in Louisiana, our incentives are disappearing.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up to everyone, Ann, and I know that's somewhat disappointing, but I know you guys will keep fighting to get that repealed or pulled back. And Dave, I want to bring you in here because you guys are deploying these chargers across the country, and we know that in a resiliency fashion, you guys have battery backup essentially built in, more or less to your charging stations, which is fantastic. I think it's great, especially looking at this on a charge rate. If the grid goes down, you still have that capability to charge the vehicles. Can you kind of talk a little bit about how funding funding opportunities has been able to help you guys deploy your chargers as well?
Yeah, so a lot of what Richard said, a lot of these have been deployed already in California. And we are really using the Volkswagen mitigation funds throughout the United States. It's really been helpful, and it's really made the upfront costs more attractive. We've got a story to tell. The battery storage adds to the cost, but it also adds to a lot of the superpowers, as I like to say. And the total cost of ownership is very attractive. So, but no, Volkswagen funding, and there's little pockets of money from utilities and local agencies. So yeah, another shout out to Clean Cities and keeping us informed of the buckets of money that show up that we wouldn't normally know about.
Perfect, thank you. And Eric, I want to bring you in here because you guys are really you're providing the power across your entire region. And I'm interested in how Entergy works with your customer base. Do you guys offer any incentives for your, for your customers for infrastructure, anything like that, for charging infrastructure?
Sure, great question. In our New Orleans territory, we offer a rider called the Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Rider, EVCI, and it allows for a customer to call up Entergy, and we can provide and install as well as own and operate a charger on a customer's facility, reducing the upfront cost to zero and allowing a simple payback mechanism through a new line item on the monthly bill.
Okay, that's perfect. Didn't you have a lot of people taking advantage of that, if you don't mind my asking?
It's still something that's evolving. Obviously, the last year it passed right before COVID happened, and that has certainly slowed us down. We're hoping for that to ramp up during 2021.
No, that's good.
Yeah, also Entergy eTech has $250 rebates for Entergy customers to install chargers at your personal residence.
That's correct, and that is applicable for fleet chargers for any type of charger.
Yeah.
Good. So kind of going back to Eric, your presentation on your fleet, you guys are rolling out vehicles systematically that you're electrifying and trying to figure out how to best do this. So as you're going through your assessments, can you talk a little bit about where you see, can those vehicles that are being electrified eventually become an asset that may not even be mobile at that point, if you know what I mean? It's not being used, but it still could be used.
Sure. It's still mobile though, right?
Yeah, it is still mobile.
It'll be the most mobile of all the applications. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a great question. I think anyone that has had the chance to see that Ford F-150 Lightning commercial, one of their key value propositions was that it can be used as a backup generator for a home. I'm expecting to see these things deployed everywhere, and not just within our fleet, and by that I mean any vehicle or truck that has that. But not just there, but really on work sites across the country. Having that backup generation that you can plug not only your house into for resiliency, but plug your tools into, plug a variety of things. It's going to be a huge asset for the future of how energy is used in a more distributed fashion.
Mm-hmm. No, that's perfect. And Dave, I want to bring you in on this because you guys are essentially providing the charging capabilities along the way. With just taking Eric's example as their fleet, I mean, anything from airboats to bucket trucks that they have out there in the field, how does FreeWire kind of accommodate the charging capabilities? I mean, could you theoretically charge all types of vehicles as long as they have standard connectors?
Sure, with each one, Moby can absolutely charge every electric vehicle, and then the Boost will charge every vehicle that can charge on a DC fast charger. You know, we had an interesting experience with a company I won't name. I'm not sure if I have permission, but we actually coupled a Moby with a Boost charger and had a truly mobile fast charging for a special event that took place, and we were able to power the truck. I'll give you that hint. But it was pretty cool how we were able to have a truly mobile situation, and it was a great success.
Good. I appreciate that, and the fact that you guys have already done it is wonderful to see that. And Eric, just to kind of throw it back to you real quick on Entergy's work in looking at electrifying your fleets, and you guys cover a relatively large region. Have you worked with other utilities or I guess other states and regions in building out kind of this evacuation corridor?
Yeah, so that's one of the key initiatives that we're working on right now is our e-highway initiative. We are coordinating with a variety of different southern and southeastern utilities in order to build out charging infrastructure, DC fast charging infrastructure across the South. And so really the key that we're working on right there is installing DC fast charging every 50 to 100 miles along all interstate corridors, which I think is really one of the key things. You know, long distance charger applications is one of the key barriers for adoption, not only for evacuation routes, but those evacuation routes, I-10, I-49, and I-55 are key, you know, flows, including the bidirectional flows for people that are evacuating. Beyond that, you know, we have to look at what are our highways that aren't interstates that are not covered by that e-highway initiative and start figuring out, okay, how do we serve those? You know, the one that comes to mind for me is Highway 90 that cuts across all of southern Louisiana. That one is really going to be essential for evacuation routes and ensuring that people from, you know, Houma, Thibodaux, Morgan City are able to get to I-10, you know, safely and confidently with their electric vehicles. They can then hit the larger interstate corridors that will be, you know, readily electrified, not only for evacuation purposes, but for general travel purposes as well.
No, I love that you guys are working together and looking at this from a regional perspective, as opposed to, you know, just kind of one off, here's what we're going to do domestic, you know, here at home, but looking at this in a much larger fashion, coordinated fashion that's excellent. So I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing there. Just one kind of random side note, I was talking with somebody down in South Florida a little while back, and they were like, yeah, the last time a hurricane came through, it knocked out all of our power. We were all upset. And they were like, well, and then I just bought a Tesla. So I just got a couple solar panels. I drove off the very next day. Everyone's stuck at home because all the gas stations were down. I was like, well, that's, you know, you don't want to gloat in that perspective because no one was hurt. So that was good. But that, yeah, so I mean, there are ways to kind of look at that from almost your own personal perspective, but then also looking at what you guys are doing regionally is great. Richard, I want to bring you guys in. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Sorry, and just speaking from the regional perspective a little more, with you being over in Florida, you know, it really does, the interconnectedness of this region and having that interconnection of charging is so important. You know, when I think of evacuating for a storm, I'm looking at Houston, Dallas, you know, Jackson, Atlanta. Everything from there will be electrified with DC fast charging. But then the same for you over in Florida. You can evacuate to New Orleans with complete confidence that you'll be served the entire distance of the travel.
No, absolutely. I love it. It is great. It solves so many issues as we're kind of looking at this in a much broader scope. And Richard, I want to bring you in because in the Southeast, we have this, you know, unique events every year to our area. We get hurricanes all the time. You guys are dealing with wildfires. You're dealing with power cutoffs. How, as a fleet operator, how are you guys kind of preparing yourselves? I mean, as you're being told to move in with the advanced clean truck rule, how are you guys kind of looking at this and going, all right, what's our backup plan here?
Well, I think the important factor of consideration is the intended use of the vehicle. And I think if it requires interoperability, deployment outside the area until the electric vehicle charging network is built out, you still have to rely on traditional petroleum fuels. And in that case, you want to use the lowest carbon, petroleum fuel or petroleum fuel substitute that you can, or perhaps natural gas, but natural gas isn't widely available. When it comes to the power shutoffs, as a fleet manager, we're starting to rethink the future on how we order vehicles. Instead of looking at, what are our specifications, what's the minimum range we need, the minimum fuel load, whether it's a gallon of fuel or whether it's kilowatt hour of electric battery storage, we're starting to think, well, maybe we should start buying these units with larger capacity battery packs, because as we get to vehicle to grid, and you mentioned it, Jared, with the school bus, which is an ideal application for battery storage, it might make sense to look at your vehicles not just as the tool that transports staff to and from work, but also as battery storage systems. And once you do that, you can kind of maybe minimize, because there's a lot of interest in California in facility battery storage and solar and demand charges. So everyone's looking at this, and kind of the wild card is the vehicle fleet as these very aggressive electrification efforts are unfolding. Maybe we start up-speccing that vehicle as we spend a little more for that battery, because we know it's going to eliminate an additional expense with battery storage at the facility, or heaven forbid, we may even make some money selling electricity back to the grid from an extensive solar system. So, as a fleet manager, typically you don't think about these things. I never thought about them, but we're kind of being forced to, and it all ties into resiliency as well. So we don't have all the answers. We got lots of partners. Utility is definitely going to play a big role, the utilities moving forward. And by the way, they're also a great source of funding opportunities. I kind of left them off the table. Currently, California, they're offering charging rebates. They're offering all kinds of great programs. Some even have a plug-in vehicle rebate for the vehicle itself, like PG&E does. So again, check with your Clean Cities Coalition on the funding, and just keep your finger on the pulse of the industry, because a lot of folks are trying to figure this out right now. You don't have to do it on your own.
No, that's great. And I love just, kind of the rebates that are coming in. And I'm actually going to ask you a question real quick, even though you weren't part of this panel, so to speak. In Louisiana, is there anything you can talk to that you would like to see from policy perspective or funding application perspective for the state to do?
Oh, so you wanted me to comment on what we want the state to do policy-wise? We are not allowed to actually delve into any sort of suggestions to the state, but I am participating in the Governor's Climate Initiative Task Force, and as in the Transportation Committee. And so we are looking at best practices and things that we can suggest to the state that they can use to incentivize emission-reducing practices in transportation. So as a function of that group and working with that group, we are making some recommendations to the state that we hope will be enacted. I believe Dave had his hand raised too for a moment there.
Mistake.
Oh, it's a mistake. Okay. I didn't know if you were like, hey, I want to chime in.
It horrified me to see that. Sorry.
No, you're fine, because I was actually going to ask you a question, Dave. You guys are building out this essentially the charging ecosystem across the country. And as Eric was saying, we're looking at electrifying interstate corridors and things. One thing I'd like to know, have you guys put any thought into kind of a notification system of chargers that are available, open, up and operating, especially after like one of these singular events like a hurricane?
Yeah, so we work with network providers, various network providers, and that would be the route. They would be responsible for that, but we would they would allow alert customers of stations that were available or were in use online, offline. But that's our partnership with the network providers. No,
that's good. We I administered a program down here in Florida for transit agencies, specifically looking at the electrification routes and for transit specifically, and then how to know if a station was up or down after an event like that. Because one thing we found was after like Hurricane Michael, we had transit agencies coming in from all over the state. The problem was some of them were sending like CNG buses, having CNG. So all of a sudden, it's like the vehicles get halfway there, somebody realizes there's no CNG and they have to turn them back around. But the same thing happens if they aren't gassed up all the way and they're like, oh, we can make it, about halfway and then we'll fuel. What I don't think people realize is just the swap that was taken out. And there was no fueling stations within, a 40-mile radius. So if you only made it in, all of, like 20 miles from the place, you're done right there. So it's definitely important to make sure that we have those communications in place as well. So I'm glad that you guys kind of work on that as well. And Eric, do you guys do anything like that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one of the things that we learned from our last summer of storms was we were able to communicate with our customers to use our outage maps that are updated in real time in order to follow and track whether or not charging stations are up or down, as well as when they come back online. And so that's kind of, probably our first step in outage notifications in terms of specifically for charging infrastructure, but all of that is always available within our app and within the outage maps.
No, that's good. And Richard, I wanted to bring you back, another question on the fleet side of this. Looking at the operations, is there anything you would recommend the fleets do, like kind of in this scenario where all of a sudden the power goes out? And I saw that you guys have solar on site on some of yours. So if you have electric vehicles or hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, which we didn't really touch on in this session, have you guys kind of been planning for some of that microgrid or resiliency factor within your own fleets?
We haven't been planning, but we've certainly been monitoring the development. In particular, there's a microgrid down at UC San Diego that's been in place for quite a while. I think it's a model to emulate and also can be scalable. There's opportunities when you talk about cogeneration facilities. It's combining different energy sources. If the natural gas is still available, you can have a natural gas powered electric generator, which kind of, again, gives you an additional layer of resiliency. For us in California, solar is kind of the default solution because we have so much sun and the weather's pretty nice. It just makes sense to build that out and figure out, how do you plan to incorporate electric vehicle capacity, and then like when a disaster does occur, it's more a matter of managing your resources in the event that you do have a cloudy day. And then of course you can have wind generation too. So and it doesn't have to be the typical tower installation with the big propeller blades. There's actually horizontal, like they look like lawnmower blade wind turbines to generate electricity. So there's lots of stuff out there. I think it's just a matter of making a decision, starting small, go ahead and do a pilot, prove the concept, and then just start building out from there. But the one piece of advice I will give you, fleet manager, there's no chicken and egg scenario. Put the electric vehicle charger in first, and I'm going to tell you why. Because you can operate an electric vehicle charger without an electric vehicle, but you can't operate an electric vehicle without a charger. So that chicken and egg stuff is nonsense. Chargers first.
No, that's very sound advice. I agree. Dave, I want to ask you a question because you may have covered this and maybe I missed it. It's probably a dumb question, but I'm going to answer or ask it anyway. So with your Mobi system, talking about kind of mobile generation and being able to move these things around, are you guys just loading them onto trucks? Could you load up a semi truck full of these things and move them out to certain areas?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Flatbed trucks, the Lightning F-150, they work with a joystick, so they're mobile. I mean, they're kind of fun, and you can move them around. And Richard has got a lot of experience. You can load them up, just ramp them up, and put them on a truck, 80 kilowatt hours of energy, and put them wherever you want.
Okay, so don't sit on top of them and move them. Is that what you're saying?
I've seen it.
We actually used one of Dave's Mobis. It powered our mobile lunch truck, whatever you want to call it, the catering truck. It was really cool because we could bring it to an interior parking garage. Normally they operate off an onboard gasoline or diesel powered generator, but we had a Mobi available and it was kind of cool. It's not like you're negotiating an obstacle course. Frankly, if you could play a video game, you can drive a Mobi where it needs to go. And my 11-year-old grandson could easily operate the technology. It's absolutely a wonderful resource.
Awesome.
No, that's wonderful. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left, and so I want to give Dave, Richard, and Eric kind of the last words on this, and just really for everyone that's still on the call, just kind of your takeaways, like kind of key. If you could talk to anybody about resiliency, what would be your 1 to 2 things that they would take away? And Eric, you want to go ahead and go first?
Sure. What I would say is, believe us based on our actions, not our words. We are electrifying our fleet, not only in the face of resiliency concerns, but with the responsibility of restoring power to our customers during outages. And if we can electrify our fleet, I'm confident that we can find solutions for anyone. In the same vein of that, if you are planning or considering or interested in electrifying, please reach out to me or to Entergy. We are here to help, and we want to. Our goal is to enable this and make this as easy as possible for you, and our experience will help us do that.
Thank you, Richard.
Well, I would say diversify your fuel portfolio. Don't leave all your eggs in one basket. And in doing that, collaborate with other fleets in your area. And the best way to do this, if you're not sure where to start, go to your local Clean Cities Coalition, sign up, participate. That's how I got involved. I was the fleet manager for Airborne Express, never heard of Clean Cities, had to deploy our first ever alternative fuel program, CNG vehicles. Clean Cities helped me. They invited me to join, and then they tricked me into being a coordinator. That was 25 years ago.
That's wonderful. And Dave.
Yeah, so I just think the where the industry, the EV industry is going with the pickup trucks and all the new innovations with FreeWire and battery storage in particular, the industries are changing, and the innovations are really driving where it's going to go, and it's just exciting to be a part of it. It's different than when I started 11 years ago.
Thank you, and thank you everybody. And with that, Anne, I want to give it back over to you.
Thank you. This has been a fascinating conversation, one we're going to need to have again, because technology keeps changing, and we're going to keep having hurricanes. Y'all are going to keep having wildfires, and we're going to have a lot of lessons learned as we start deploying more electric vehicles. So I did want to let everyone know that this is being recorded, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel here, Louisiana Clean Fuels.